Hello F11 members and welcome to the Fundamentals of Post-Production video tutorials for issue 41, June 2015. Last month we were looking at Lightroom's capability to merge exposures in the new version of Lightroom 6 and Lightroom CC, which we concluded was quite a significant step forward, an asset, definitely. This month I'd like to move on to looking at how we can use the same new developments in Lightroom to merge panoramas. Previously we've had to expose, process and export images to be stitched together, subsequently using other software such as Photoshop to make panoramas. Now we can do it all in Lightroom. But let's just see how good it is and how it's done. So what I've done is I've got an image here, or a series of images, shot in Sri Lanka back in 2011. Here's the details down here. And I've made a series of exposures overlapping from left to right on a tea plantation there with Sripada in the distance. That's Adams Peak. And what I'm going to do now is process the images as I would do normally with any other picture. But of course I have to bear in mind that whatever I do to this one central frame, this sort of key frame in the sequence that makes up the panorama, whatever I do to this one has to be applied to all the others. So the first thing I'm going to do is look as usual at my black and white points. So here I go. I come down to, first of all, my white point, and I look at my indicators here, and I think I've got the option of just moving the whites to the right just a touch before a bit of clipping starts to come in. You can see those little red dots appearing there, and that's about as far as I can do. I'm getting a touch of clipping of my shadows here, just a touch. If you look when I hold my cursor over that indicator there on the display down here, you will see a few little blue patches indicating clipping of shadows. So I'm now going to just try and recover some of those by just dialing in a touch of shadow recovery. And if I hold my cursor over there now, same rogue blue patches down here, but they're minimal. I really am not worried about that at all. I'm going to add a little bit of vibrance to the image just to really make those greens, those saturated greens, lush greens, give them a little bit of punch, but obviously not too much. Subtlety is always the key. As usual, I'm going to sharpen scenic, use the default there. I come down and I adjust my sharpening masking by holding down Alt and sliding the masking slider over until the black area, which indicates where the mask is being applied, covers the sky and the water. Really, those are the areas where there's no discernible detail that needs to be masked. Okay, that's great. Now I come on down here to my lens corrections, and if I go to Profile and click on Enable Profile Corrections, what that does is it's recognized the lens I used, and it's now made the corrections for the distortion and the coverage, i.e. all lenses are brighter in the center of the image area than they are at the edges. Not normally an issue, but when we're stitching panoramas together it can be. So I would recommend, whenever you're doing panoramic stitching, use this profile correction facility on all the images to be merged. Okay, that's the lens profile done, and now I'm going to add a touch of a grad here, and I'm going to click on the grad filter. If I hold down the shift button, it means that the grad is applied level, which is quite handy. So if I start the grad from the very top of the peak and apply it over a fairly soft area. I can fine-tune that, of course, and I'm going to come back on my exposure. I don't want to do too much of this because I have to bear in mind that this grad will be applied to each and every image as well. So just a little bit of a grad here, and I want to pull back the highlights as well there in the brightest part of the image. Okay, and at that stage now I'll just come back and consider where I've got to. I click on Done. Looking at the image overall, I'd say it's just a little bit too bright, so I'm going to use the tone curve down here just to darken it a touch. Bear in mind that we can fine-tune the image when it's stitched together, the panorama when it's stitched together, but I reckon now we're ready to go with the merge. But first of all, I need to synchronize all the images. So if I now go and I select all the images in the sequence to be merged like this, and if I now go to sync and it asks me what I want to synchronize, and I click on synchronize, and it's going to apply those adjustments to all the images. Okay, that's done. So if I go back to library mode here, and I now go here up to photo, and you'll see there's a command called photo merge and panorama. So I click on that, and I'm going to select auto select projection this time. I'm going to unclick the box marked auto crop, and now it's working on creating a preview of how the image will be stitched together. See how long that takes. It's got a fair bit of information to chew on because we're merging how many images here? I don't know, about 10. Each image being a full-size raw file. I always think this is really quite a fun thing, quite enjoyable stitching panoramas. And there you can see the preview. It's not yet merged them, this is just the preview, but it seems to have done quite an impressive job of merging there. I can't see any problems with that merge at this kind of size, at the preview size anyways. Let's just experiment with using auto crop. So if I click that box on, you can see it chops off the white bits, which is really quite good actually. I couldn't do a better job myself really. So in this particular case, anything to save time, I'm going to use the auto crop function, and now I click on merge, and it's now up here. You'll see in the progress bar it's saying creating panorama. So let's see how long that actually takes. So welcome back. That took about 3 minutes to create that panorama, and here is the final merged image, and it's created it as a DNG, and over here we'll see the details, and it's a huge image, 20,449 pixels wide, and we've used auto crop feature, which has cropped it down to 19,602 pixels wide. So that's a big image, and let's just go into develop mode now and look at the panorama. And I am very pleased with the way that Lightroom has stitched that together. I think that's really quite impressive. Of course, I'm not finished yet though, because the image needs a little bit of cropping yet. There's some stuff creeping into the edges that I didn't intend to be in the image. When you're making a panorama, you always go wider than you need, because you can crop down to suit afterwards. And I don't like this tree coming in here, the edge, and this edge here is a bit messy, so I'm going to crop that a little bit. So I just go to my crop tool here, and now you can see there it's got the crops that we used auto crop to, the cropping marks the auto crop selected. So I'm just going to fine tune that a touch by bringing that into about here, and this one to about here. Actually, I always think that it's tempting to go too wide with panoramas. It's fun to do and they look great, but the trouble is a panorama that is too wide is just a bootlace of a picture, and I'm just going to increase this dimension a touch here, and now there's a bit of white creeping in the bottom there, but I can use content aware fill in Photoshop to fill that in. Okay, now let's click done there, and that is my panorama. Pretty impressive. Let's just see what I would do to that. I just would like to select the sky and add just a little bit of contrast to that. Apart from that, I really don't think there's much that I would do to this image at all. In terms of shadow clipping or highlight clipping, there's none. It's pretty good. So to adjust the density and contrast of the sky, I could use either the grad filter or the adjustment brush, and I'm going to use the adjustment brush here. So I'm clicking on that there, and now I can adjust the size of my brush here and the feathering, which is at maximum feathering, set down here. That's at the line between the inner and the outer circle indicates where the feathering is being applied. If I click on this box down here, show selected mask overlay now, and now if I paint with this brush and over the area that I want to select, being careful not to impinge on the actual landscape here. Okay, and now if I come off that and now just come here to my adjustment here, and I'm going to put a touch of contrast into the sky and pull back the exposure just a touch, and that works quite well. At this stage I now click on done, and the picture is there. It really is almost a finished panorama, apart from that one bit here, the white bit down the bottom, which really is a job for Photoshop. So let's export this image now and open in Photoshop and deal with that. Let's just say that if I hadn't cropped this image, and if I go back to my crop lines here, if I'd stuck to this original crop like that, I could have done everything I needed to create this panorama without Photoshop, with using just Lightroom, and I think that's quite a significant advantage and a major step forward for Lightroom. But I'm just going to finish the job, as I mentioned, just by adjusting that bottom reach of the crop there. Click on done, and now if I go library, export, and ask it to open the image in Photoshop. So choose where I want it to put the images, and here we go, images, processed, and I'm put it in a folder called catch up. Select the folder, rename the images to, we'll call them 3, and I want to produce a TIFF, ProPhoto RGB 16 bits. I don't want to resize, resolution 300. Don't want to sharpen because that's already been done. That's output sharpening. We've already adjusted sharpening, and ask to open in Photoshop, and there we go. So here's my panorama now opened in Photoshop. Looks good, doesn't it? I'm very pleased with this. And just checking the details here, if I go to image adjustments and image size, Sorry, there we go. Image size, it's telling me that I've got what is now a 443 megabyte image. Huge. Incredible quality. All I have to do, because this picture, we've done everything we need to it in Lightroom, just deal with this white bit down the bottom. So if I bring over here my tools here, if I come down on the size of the image, zoom out on the image just a touch, and now I'm going to select here the magic wand tool, and the magic wand is set up here to a tolerance of 10. And now if I just click on that white bit there, and it's selected that white bit, if I go select, modify, expand by just 2 pixels, and now if I go to select, modify, feather over a radius of 1 pixel, and now if I just go to edit, fill, and make sure content aware is selected, and click on OK, it should hopefully fill in that green bit. So if I go select, deselect, and now just zoom in to check I've got how it looks up close down the bottom where we use the fill, and I think if you look closely you can see a few wonky leaves, but anyone who didn't know really wouldn't spot that, and that is of course looking at it at huge magnification. So that is it. That is using the photo merge function in Lightroom CC to make this panorama, and I think it's worked very well. The difference between Lightroom 6 and Lightroom CC is nothing really, apart from the fact that with Lightroom Creative Cloud the updates are a constant thing, and using Lightroom CC means that you will always have the latest version of Lightroom, which when you change cameras or whatever is quite handy. So there you go. In part 2 we're going to continue our investigation of photo merging in Lightroom, and we're going to go to Corfe Castle. But that's panoramas, and I think that's quite a significant step forward for Lightroom. See you in part 2.